So it's February, just the third day into February, but we're into step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I think this is one of the, all these steps are important, and none of them are more important than another, but if we don't get this step and we don't get it right, we sometimes struggle with our sobriety. We might want to extend that out just a little bit and say, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity and give us a new life. I want to talk a little bit tonight about the biblical principles behind step 2, and they are faith and hope. I know in a previous message some time ago on step 2, I talked about our will to live or our will to die. If we want to live, if we want to change our lives, if we want to grow into the people that God intended us to be, we have to have some faith. So it's a big question in recovery. What is faith? What is faith all about? And so I went to the dictionary, and they had a couple of good definitions there, and it says, complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Then the example they use, because they put a little sentence to give you an example, I don't think is a real good one, but I thought it might be kind of funny because it says, this restores one's faith in politicians. I'm not sure that's a great example, but anyway, I thought I'd share it with you. The synonyms, the other words that go along with that would be trust, belief, confidence, conviction, credence, reliance, dependency, and there's likely a few more, but that gives you an idea. The second definition was a strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. So that's a little bit about what we think faith might be. I believe that faith is believing in something bigger and greater than myself that's out there in this universe, kind of governing and guiding this universe and guiding us. And for me, that happens to be God or Jesus as we talk here. But it doesn't have to be for you if you're not there yet. It can be the God of your understanding, whatever that might be. And we'll go through a bit of a session here to try to figure that out. So how do we require the faith allowing ourselves to come to believe that there is a power greater than us and that power could restore us to sanity? The scripture this week is Matthew 11, verse 28, and it says, and it's Jesus speaking, and he says, come to me, all of you who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. This is Jesus telling us that we are contemplating our powerlessness as we're telling people around us that we really don't want to live, that we want to die, that we're sitting broken, hopeless, and in despair. Your higher power is saying, believe in me and ask me for help, and I will lift your burdens. I will take those burdens away from you, and I'll give you rest. Step 1, we talked about something that's fairly negative, but our powerlessness or our huge weakness with drugs and alcohol. We realize that we can't control our alcohol or our drugs like many other people can. We aren't normal, so to speak. When we recognize that weakness, then we need to surround ourselves and protect ourselves and protect that weakness. We need to pull people around us to protect that weakness from being attacked. Our meetings, our sponsors, and others in recovery will help us do that. We have to admit that the power to handle our addiction is not inside us. We have not got the strength to do it on our own. So then how do we do it? Wise people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and NA and CA believe that a power greater than him or her is on the outside of them or is beyond them. And that power can restore them to sanity. But how do we get there? How do we get to the point where we believe that we can get well? So there's kind of 3 things. We came to, and we came to believe. And we'll talk about each of those. When we're new in the 12-step programs, you're told to go to meetings. And you're told to go to meetings. And you're told to go to meetings. And if you're talking to Peter, he'll likely say, go to meetings and pray. Go to meetings and pray, but go to meetings. And when you go to meetings, you have the opportunity to meet people that are exactly the same as you, that are suffering from exactly the same disease as you are. They may be at the same timeline as you. It may be a few days or a few weeks. but you'll also get to meet people that have been there for a long time, people that have had their lives returned to sanity, people that are being successful in recovery and successful in their lives, and you can watch them and you can see them and you can watch them grow, and maybe you can have them come into your life and teach you a little bit about how they got to where they were going. That's the start of your journey of believing. It's in meetings where we find others that have been restored to sanity. So we came just getting into the program. We just get started. We just kind of enter into it and we start watching. We came to is a little while down the line as our brain starts to clear up, our mind starts to clear up a little bit. We start really hearing some of the things that are being said, and we start believing to a certain degree that things can change if we're going to change our life. We can follow this simple, really simple but not easy program of recovery. Then we came to believe, after attending meetings, working with a sponsor, we become willing to accept what we hear as true. We start to see and believe that we too can get well, just like the other people that are in the rooms. Looking at 12-step programs, alcohol is only mentioned once. If you kind of look at the steps, it's only there once. And sobriety is not mentioned at all. It doesn't even talk about sobriety. It does talk about restoring to sanity. As alcoholics and addicts, we need to go to places where we can see, where we can feel, where we can touch, not in a bad way, where we can touch others that are clean and sober and they have had their sanity restored, and we can see what that looks like. Many people I work with wonder how long it's going to take. I mean, they've been in the program for a week or two now and they don't feel better yet, and they wonder how long this is going to take. So the best explanation for it is a good friend of mine that works at the Calgary Dream Center, Gary Carmichael, and he always says this, and it's very simple. If you walk 2 miles into the bush, you need to walk 2 miles out. So understand, recovery is a process and it takes time. We have to give time. Talking about a power greater than ourselves, newcomers often have difficulty with this. Over the years, I've heard old-timers, Ida, I bet you've heard this 100 times. Old-timers will tell newcomers, if you can't figure out what a higher power is, just use that doorknob. Just use the radiator at the back of the church here. Just use the coffee cup over there. That can be your higher power. And quite frankly, from my opinion, my personal opinion, that's crap. We are looking at a damaged human being, one of God's masterpieces, and to tell him to pick up an inanimate object like a coffee cup to be his higher power, something that's way beneath him, is just crazy. I believe this illness is the most dire, destructive, awful, complex, terminal thing that there is on earth. It reduces a human being to the point that he has to jump up to reach his bottom. Please don't ask him to reach down instead of reaching up to find his higher power. So if you're struggling with a higher power, and some of you may be, how do I do this? What do I have to do? How about just taking another sober alcoholic that's doing well in his program and just watch him and watch maybe that could be your higher power for a while. How about the group conscience and the group of people that you're going to, your home group? That would likely work. Because we know a string, if we just have one strand of string and we pull hard on it, it would likely break. If we wind many pieces of string together and make a bit of a rope or a cable out of it, it's almost impossible to break. So the group conscious would be very, very, very good and would be strong. How about believing that Bill has a higher power? How about believing that Peter has a higher power? How about Darren sitting back over there? And I know that my higher power, and I'm sure Bill's and Darren's is the same, and Ida's, is that they're big and strong, our higher power is, and I will lend you my higher power until you develop yours. How would that be? And you can lean on my higher power and start growing in your strength. I believe that would be a good thing to do. The strength of recovery is being around sober, successful people. We're looking to be restored to sanity. What are some of the things that we do that could indicate that we're not sane? Any ideas? Hoping that we can learn to drink like normal people is insanity, total insanity. The sane thing to do would be to fire the old higher power, which was drugs and alcohol, and find a more promising higher power, one that is on your side and fighting for you, one that fights to help you get better and helps you change your life. I think the best definition of insanity is perfect examples, but take a person that goes through treatment for, 49 days or 90 days, starts living in sober living and is doing very, very, very well, and then somewhere in his mind or her mind, she decides that she should go back to a place where it's really maybe not as safe as it should be, but her mind has convinced her that she's been sober for a long time and she should be able to do that. And when you're back in the unsafe place, you run into unsafe people, and you run into people that challenge you and ask you, come and have a drink, and you're not strong enough yet to say, no, I don't drink anymore, I don't drug anymore. And you take that first drink because in your mind, you've convinced yourself that you've had enough sobriety that you should be able to do this. You should be able to have one. I have so many people that I just had one bump, Peter. It was just one bump. And away they go off into their relapse and off back into their old lifestyle, because our addiction is sitting out on First Street, is sitting out on 7th Avenue, and it's doing push-ups, waiting for us, and it's getting stronger and stronger every day that we're sober. And so when we do take that one bump, we go back into our addiction so quickly. That's the insanity of our disease. Clean, sober, everything going well for ourselves, and when we decide to go back into it again. That's the insanity. The character defect associated with this step is despair. We ask in despair, is there any way out? And of course the answer is yes, there is. Step 2 requires that we develop a sense of faith, that there is something bigger and there is something greater than ourselves out there in this old universe. I believe a higher power has to be bigger and greater than you. It has to be a power. It cannot be something that can be destroyed. As an empty bottle, a doorknob, or other inanimate objects certainly can be. If we're really serious about recovery, we have to abandon all our old ways, all our old ideas that kept us in our addiction. We have to do the things that are never done before. We must explore what our higher power is all about. The word power means that it's something that has energy or the ability to act on you or with you to promote recovery. Let me say here that there is a big difference from seeking help from an empty bottle or seeking help from a group or of recovering alcoholics to having faith that there may be something bigger and greater than yourself. It's a progress from believing in one person or in a group to believing that group, then moving forward to believing that there's something bigger and greater than that group and that you, and it takes faith to have that happen. Thankfully, the Bible contains a clear definition of faith. Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." Simply put, the biblical definition of faith is trusting in something you cannot explicitly prove. And that's really what faith is all about. This definition of faith contains two aspects: intellectual assent and trust. Intellectual assent is believing something to be true. Trust is actually relying on the fact that something is true. So a chair is a pretty good example of that. A chair is often used to help us illustrate it. You can see a chair, and you can see that it's built and whatnot, and the trust comes from when you sit on it, thinking that it's going to hold you. Actually sitting in there is the trust part of that. Doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result is true insanity. All that drinking and drugging did was give us a temporary sense of well-being. It made us feel part of, or not quite as worthless as we had before that. Becoming a sober person free of our addiction means a restoration to sanity. In AA, we learn that by working the 12 steps, the restoration is happening in part because addiction and its accompanying insanity are not controlling our lives anymore. The emphasis is not on who or what the power is, but on what the power can do for us. As we mentioned earlier, the group of AA itself certainly qualifies as a power greater than ourselves. Our fellowship is in the millions and is always growing and is all around the world, as do the spiritual principles contained in step 12. The awareness and understanding that we can't recover alone and that we need some kind of help is really the lesson at this point in recovery. The spiritual principles that are the foundations of this step are open-mindedness, willingness, faith, trust, and the big one is humility. It really doesn't matter whether we have any idea of how the higher power greater than ourselves is going to help, just that we came to believe that that is certainly possible. As part of our recovery process, it's really helpful to ask and answer important questions pertaining to step 2. Did you make any insane decisions as a result of your addiction? Do you have any fears about coming to believe in something greater than yourself? What does "we came to believe" actually mean to you? What experiences have you heard other recovering addicts share about their process of coming to believe, and have you tried any of them in your recovery life? Do you have a problem accepting that there is a power greater than yourself? What evidence do you have of a higher power, that it might be working in your life? What are some of the things you consider good examples of sanity? What changes in your thinking and behavior are necessary for your restoration to sanity? Why is having a closed mind harmful to your personal recovery? How are you demonstrating open-mindedness in your life right now? What fears do you have that you're getting in the way of your trust? What do you need to do to help let go of those fears? Just wrapping up, to get this step, we need to let go of our old ways of thinking. We need to rein in our egos. As I said, ego is a huge problem. And in my world, ego stands for, it's an acronym for edging God out. So as our ego gets bigger, our humility gets less, and our God gets further away in our minds. So we need to keep the ego reined in. We need to build our humility up. We need to reach out to our sponsor, to people in the meeting rooms, to our recovery circles, and to find out what and how they believe. Come to believe in a process for many of us. One, we need to keep an open mind. Remember, as we said last week, we need enough faith the size of a mustard seed. It's not very much to make this work. I think God said if you have the faith of the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. So surely we can get recovery with that. If we keep trying each day, we will find our faith growing, and we will find examples of it in our daily lives. There are no coincidences. We all know that. So I want you, as you go through the week, this week, is to be conscious of different things that are happening in your life, and maybe you can question yourself. I wonder if that's God working in my life, if that's just a coincidence. And I don't think it is. I think you'll find that it's your Creator, your higher power, doing things in your life. I know when I pray, and when I have things on my mind and on my heart that I pray about, it seems to me that God brings things into my life to help with those situations.